It's going to put us in there automatically.
Automatically. Here we are. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to TME Presents, a network of communities. You've read the article. Now learn the rest of the story. I'm Daniel Wheatley, the Associate Editor for the Military Engineer, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. All the attendees are in a listen-only mode for the presentation. Your chat tab is for general conversation, as well as any technical issues you may be encountering. Let's go ahead and try it out by typing where you're listening from today. You can submit questions for the presenter at any time by using the Questions tab in your control panel. We are going to collect these and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Be sure to upvote questions that you'd like to hear answered. We'll answer as many as time allows at the end of the presentation. Originally published in our September-October 2020 issue, a network of communities covered the innovative trail system at Fort Benning, Georgia, made possible through collaborative partnerships, advanced planning, and innovative cost savings. An extensive and accessible recreational trail at Fort Benning connects soldiers, families, and civilians across the local region. Maintaining such an extensive trail system is not without challenges, but the reward is a world-class system that promotes connectedness, individual health, quality of life, and alternative commuting methods. I would now like to introduce today's featured presenter, Kirk Tickner, PE Fellow, SAME. He serves as the Chief of the Environmental Management Division, the Directorate of Public Works at Fort Benning, Georgia. Kirk, you now have the digital floor, so take it away.
Good morning, everybody. And yeah, I'm really glad to see that y'all chimed in from where you're from, and I really appreciate you being here. And Bill Barrett is on. Bill, I'm just going to give you a shout out immediately to say that Bill is actually going to help out with a student group that's doing some conceptual design work for a proposed new trail from Phoenix City into Fort Benning. So, Bill, thanks for joining this morning. And for the rest of you who are on here, I just want to also say right from the get-go, please chat in and let us know what you want to get from this conversation. We've got a small group here, so I'd like to make sure that this answers your questions. A little bit about myself. As Daniel said, I'm the Environmental Division Chief at Fort Benning, but I have a side job, and that is a representative to the Columbus, Georgia Chamber of Commerce on the Vibrant and Connected Spaces Committee. And so I'm the bike trail advocate for Fort Benning. I'm a licensed professional engineer, chemical engineering with master's in environmental from Colorado School of Mines. Went to Iowa State University for my bachelor's. One of the hobbies that I enjoy is both my wife and I like to do a lot of biking. As a matter of fact, we went on a biking boating tour in Germany. We've been all over the country and other places, and have brought some of those ideas to here. But in this virtual environment that we're in, I feel a little disconnected from audiences when I do this thing. So I want to ask you to chat in and let me know what your hobbies are. And I'm just going to tell you, one of my hobbies right now, wintertime hobby, is I'm building a Lego replica of Chicago. Yeah, that's right. So if you got a hobby, please chime in. And let's go to the next slide, Daniel, please. Okay, so this is for a picture of downtown Columbus, the beautiful river walk in downtown Columbus that goes right along the Chattahoochee River, and it Fort Benning borders uh, uh, Benning Fort Benning borders Columbus on the south. Next slide, please. And I put this slide up just to kind of orient you a little bit. Columbus, Georgia, you can see is the big red dot in the center, and that's a metropolitan area of about 300,000 people, an hour and a half south of Atlanta. On the other side of the Chattahoochee River, there is Phoenix City, and then Fort Benning is shown as this large installation shown in a peach color to the south of Columbus, and Fort Benning is 184,000 acres roughly, I think, and it is you put Benning and Columbus together, you got something about the size of Metro Atlanta. And yeah, I want to next slide, please. Kind of before we get started, Daniel, would you mind putting up our first two poll questions? I'd like to see if we can get a response out of those.
All right, our first question here is just a little information about your background. Are you active military, government civilian, a contractor, a retired, or maybe a student? Just pop in your answers there. We'll keep this up for, a couple more seconds as we get some responses in. So Kirk, it looks like we've got a pretty fair spread here. Not a lot of students here, but government civilians mostly, but a fair number of contractors, some retired people, and a couple active military here. All right.
Awesome.
We're going to close the poll here.
I'm a government civilian. Let's go ahead and go to that second poll question, Daniel.
All right. And this is just about who you mostly serve client-wise. Air Force, Navy or Marines, Army, other government, or private sector? I
serve the Army. And that's interesting, Daniel. You've got people that are responding to the poll questions. What I encourage you to do is chat in. Don't be shy. I want to find out what your interest is. Chat in with what your interest is in this presentation. Why are you tuning in? I'd love to know.
All right, we're going to close the poll here. And just to close that out there, Kirk, it looks like we've got a pretty good 38% here are like you, serving the Army. But we've got, a couple serving the Air Force, 15% Air Force, 15% Navy Marines, 8% other government, and 23% are private sector.
Awesome.
So a great spread.
Chris from San Antonio, I'm wondering if maybe that person serves the Army, or Laura in Athens, Alabama, really wondering what you do. And so chime in, guys, chat in. So, hey, here's what I'm going to try to cover today. The key concepts, the trail website and signage, what we did, how we did it, techniques for improvement. In other words, if you're interested in doing this where you're at, how do you get it going? And then we'll talk about some of the history along our trail system and how this benefits soldiers and families. Scott just joined in. Thanks for joining, Scott. Jamie. Hey, we finally got a chat. Janine Barnes has a personal passion for ideas to increase biking in both private and federal areas, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Well, Janine, this is for you. I'm going to tell you what we're doing, and I'm going to give my contact information at the end. So if you want to reach out to me, I love to collaborate on this stuff. So next slide. Okay, so a little bit about the history of the uh, the Riverwalk in Columbus, Georgia, which is a great asset. It attracts people from all over to come to Columbus and bike along here. The Riverwalk is a maintenance road. It was originally built in the 90s when Columbus Waterworks and the city of Columbus were working on um, building and upgrading the sanitary sewer and storm water collection system. So these huge pipes ran right along the Chattahoochee River. They needed access to them, so they built this road. But the people who did this were visionaries and said, "Hey, why don't we create that maintenance road to be dual purpose, so that it can not only we can get our trucks down there to get to the manholes or repair broken pipelines, but we can make it a biking, walking opportunity for the people in Columbus." And frankly, it's been transformative. What you see here is a bridge that was recently built that goes over one of the dams on the Chattahoochee River. It is spectacular. If you're ever finding yourself in this area, do yourself a favor, rent a bike. There's plenty of bike rental places. Get out and see this stuff. When you get to the top of that bridge, you've got this view of downtown Columbus and a lot of historic buildings that are in view when you get up there. So it is truly spectacular. That bridge probably costs at least $5 million by my estimation. Well, so the rest of the history is that in the about 10 years ago, the city of Columbus decided to tackle some of its most significant problems. The local Chamber of Commerce for Columbus, Georgia, came up with a program called Columbus 2025, and that was to it was a plan that was developed in the interest of economic development. And so there was these committees like education, retaining talented workforce, and connecting people. Well, one of those committees was the Vibrant Connected Spaces Committee, which I'm a member of as a representative of Fort Benning. And I was chosen to be on that committee because I was the bike trail advocate for Fort Benning. And that committee work has been wonderful because the collaboration and the ideas that we've gotten from that committee work has really been made changes to both systems for the better. As a matter of fact, next slide, I'll give you a good example. One of the things that people in the city of Columbus said to us and to me as a committee member was, "Hey, you've got a great bike trail system on Fort Benning, and it's a walkable, bikeable place, but people don't know that they can come on to Fort Benning, and they don't know anything about where your trails go. So you need some signage." That was the suggestion. And at the time, I was the operations and maintenance chief, and I got some quotes from my own contractor to build some magnificent signs with maps and kind of like what the Riverwalk had in Columbus. And the quotes came back $10,000 per sign. And I knew immediately I probably shouldn't be spending that kind of money on signage. Well, we have an in-house sign shop, and we decided, well, frankly, it was a suggestion from my wife. I was telling her, "Hey, we got these quotes, but it's kind of expensive. I'm not sure what to do." And she said, "You don't need a map on a sign. That people don't do that anymore. You need a website, and you probably even need a QR code that links people to a website that shows those maps, so your signs don't have to change." And bingo, I got somebody who knew how to generate a QR code. It's super easy on Google, and we created that QR code that linked to these maps that our MWR people were so generous to add to their website. And now when you come on to Fort Benning, you get a welcoming sign like this, what's shown in this picture, and it tells you, gives you that website address. If you take your smartphone and just point it at that QR code, it immediately brings up a website. Oh, by the way, to honor my wife with this idea, that's a picture of her bike leaning up against that sign. Next slide, please. By the way, I just have to say this. I saw Gary from Seattle joined in, and his passion is running and guitars. My son opened up a guitar shop. He built them from scratch, trying to build them like Fender guitars. So Gary, you and my son would have something in common. Thanks for joining. So I mentioned that signage in the web address. Well, when you point your smartphone at the sign, or you type in that web address, this page here is what you see from the MWR website. That's Park Ponds and Trails for Fort Benning. And you go down to the bottom of the page, and you've got a link for bike and pedestrian recreation trails and the maps that you're going to see in a minute. I want to say that this website is very easily searchable. If you just Google something like Benning or Fort Benning bike trails or Fort Benning recreation trails, this website will be the first thing that pops up. It'll take you straight to this page. Next slide, please. So the link for the Fort Benning map brings you to this map right here. And what you'll see is a color-coded listing of our trails on Benning. We have at least 20 miles of what I would call Riverwalk quality trails. By that, I mean 10 feet wide, so social distancing is possible when you're passing on the trails, and really nice high quality trails that any type of bike, but also runners, joggers, pedestrians, people with strollers or wheelchairs can use. So this network is shown here. But one of the things I'll point out about our map, if you're thinking about improving or creating maps for your own system, is that we show our restrooms on our map. And our restrooms are open just about any time you'd be biking, which I think is always handy. And also our restaurants and our main points of attraction are shown on our map. So next slide. But we collaborated with the city and shared data. They've got our data with our maps, and we've got their data with their maps. We collaborated to also put their trail system on that website. And one of the things I'll point out is at the very bottom of this map of the Columbus system, which in green pretty much chases along or runs in parallel with the Chattahoochee River. Our system begins at the very bottom of this map, the south end of the map. But you can see the Columbus system goes all along the Chattahoochee River, which provides all kinds of beautiful vistas, but also reaches out into the northeastern suburbs of Columbus. And Columbus currently has about 30 miles of trail, but has a goal and has funding, or will be getting funding, I'm certain, to expand that system to about 80 miles. And I'll also say on the left or west side of this is Phoenix City, and that's where my colleague Bill Barrett is going to be working with some students to come up with a conceptual design to run the trail on the other side of the river down to Uchee Creek at Fort Benning. And that Uchee Creek is a recreational facility at Fort Benning that is open to the public. And so if we can get that trail built, it'll connect a loop that would be frankly awesome. Probably be about a 30-mile loop on either side of the Chattahoochee River. and it would create a great opportunity for the soldiers and families that use the Uchi Creek recreational facility, which has docks, fishing, playgrounds, everything you can imagine for recreation. Connect it with that trail up to Phoenix City and then across the river there in Fort Benning. We'll have a great amenity. Well, that trail in Phoenix City to Columbus is, frankly, it's just a gleam in the eye of the planners right now. They don't have any money. And so, using an idea that we employed at Fort Benning, they're going to get a class of students from the University of Auburn to study this as part of a GIS and civil engineering course to kind of come up with conceptual routes that could be used to make that connection. And Mr. Barrett, who runs a local engineering and surveying firm here in Columbus and Phoenix City, is going to help those students with some real life problems that they're going to encounter as trying to do that. So, Bill, thank you. Next slide. So here's Fort Benning's headquarters, a beautiful building renovated from the old headquarters about 10 years ago. And out front of the headquarters is the iconic "Follow Me" statue, or the infantryman statue. And it's that statue is one. It's actually a replica statue that was made out of bronze. The original was fiberglass and now sits at the National Infantry Museum, which is kind of at the Benning Trailhead. But this statue is a replica that was procured by me when I was the O&M chief. So, as a matter of fact, the original statue we didn't have any use for, and we slid it into a warehouse at the airfield. And when they built the museum, they said, "Hey, that'd be a perfect original statue for the rotunda." And we saved that statue. It was fiberglass and started to fall apart, but we had it renovated, and now it's on display at that covered location at the museum. But one of the neat things about our trail system and all the history on it is also the accessibility, what it does for handicapped people. You can walk out of this headquarters, which has handicap accessible doors, and go down a ramp and go all the way to downtown Columbus, all the way out to the suburbs without crossing a curb. So you can come out of this building and go approximately 30 miles nonstop, thanks to our trail system. And not only is it the full scale bike and recreation trails, but it's also sidewalks and things like that we'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. So how do you get this built? Well, here's a good example. This is an extension of our trail system that was built when we repaved Marne Road. And what you see here is a soldier running on this segment of the trail that connects to those trails that go to downtown Columbus. He's running up toward the hospital. And there's actually a barracks there for soldiers who were rehabbing. It was originally built for wounded soldiers. And that barracks is directly connected to this trail. So when we repaved Marne Road, we said, why don't we spend an extra $1 million and right alongside it build this trail? And that's what we did. Another thing we did is, and we do, is we build new trails with our project money. Same money that we use for repaving roads, rebuilding bridges, putting new roofs on buildings, new air conditioning systems. Every once in a while, we'll take a sliver of that money, not much, and we'll extend our trail. And a great example of that comes to mind is when our trail system was kind of in its infancy about 10 years ago, we wanted to do, the University of Georgia professor there approached us about building a master plan for our trail systems. And so that professor had a group of students, and for some reason, one of them had this idea of doing a master plan for bike trails at Fort Benning. And we readily welcomed them. We provided some mentoring and advice, and they came up with this map. Some of those ideas that students have were pretty far-fetched, but most of them were very practical. And since our garrison commander at the time was a biking enthusiast, arrangements were made for him to be briefed on the master plan. So that was done. And he gave the students some feedback. They came back, gave him a final presentation. Shortly after that, he slapped the table and allocated about $2 million to put into to build some of the trails that were most urgently needed as part of the students' presentation, as part of their project. And the ones that were most urgently needed were ones where people were biking along roads that were busy commuter routes and things like that. Or another trail was linking a critical large housing area directly to a riverwalk that was built as part of a Milcom project. It was a large extension of the Riverwalk Trail built during BRAC, and he wanted to connect a neighborhood to that. So he just being a biking enthusiast and having control over that money helped improve our trail system. So those are ways you can use money. And next slide. But you can do small things too. And I'll give an example here. This is a curb cut where it's a sidewalk that has curb cuts and is stroller accessible along the entire 1 mile length of the sidewalk, except for one darn curb that was in the way. And so we submitted a work order. Our maintenance chief approved it. It was done in-house to just create this curb cut and this ramp, not to code as an ADA accessible ramp, but certainly usable and functional. And so we just spent a few bucks here, probably a couple $1,000, and made an improvement so that people using strollers or walking and running and even biking, kids use our sidewalks to bike to school at Fort Benning. It's like Mayberry. It makes the whole thing connected and vibrant. I see people on these trails all the time. Another thing we have for, and I think military installations can do this, is we have a recycling program. And the proceeds for our recycling program, which brings in a lot of money because of the brass that's shot on our ranges, that money comes in and can be used for morale, recreation, and welfare in accordance with the Army rules for recycling. But you can also do projects. And if you've got a project that you propose that either saves energy or is a pollution prevention thing, you can use that recycling money for that. We have just repaved about 1.3 miles of our Riverwalk. That was the oldest section. We're going to repave that here starting in March with recycling dollars to the tune of about $377,000. So that's just, I think the whole key to trails and getting it going is one, collaboration, because you're going to have to coordinate and work with others, but obviously getting the money. And I think the real key to getting the money is to have an advocate that will get people together, sell the idea, and just spend the time and the effort to go get the money. Next slide. Well, this is an example of some of the historic points on Fort Benning. And those three jump towers you see, the tall towers, that's iconic Fort Benning right there. Those towers were built in the 40s and for World War II. Some people have a myth or a thought that they came from the World's Fair. No, that wasn't it. They were modeled after the big World's Fair tower that had parachutes that would get dropped and lowered. But these were built specifically for training airborne troops, and they in themselves are a historic artifact at Fort Benning. And that statue you see in front of those is at Soldiers Park, and that statue is the Follow Me statue, and it actually sits on some bricks that were recovered from the bridge that went from into Remagen, Germany, where the Allied troops first crossed into Germany during World War II. Now, what we have created is a historic walking, biking loop on Fort Benning. And the next thing we're going to do is create some little signs with QR codes so that as you're on that loop and following that trail, you'll see these little signs. You can point your phone to it, and probably a video or something will pop up with one of our historians telling the stories as you make your way along the historic walking biking tour. Next slide. Daniel, am I still coming through loud and clear?
Absolutely, Kirk, loud and clear.
Wonderful, thank you. And thanks, Daniel, for prompting for questions. Love to see if anybody wants to know something. The next thing is on the historic walking biking tour is African-American history. We've got quite a bit of that on Fort Benning. As you know, Black soldiers were integrated into the military right shortly after World War II and have been a part of the military history in this country from almost the very beginning. So we have a lot of interesting, notable heroes that have served at Benning. We most recently marked a house that General Powell lived in, Colin Powell lived in when he was at Fort Benning, and that's being commemorated this week. And that plaque that's on that house is one of the points of interest you'll see when you pull up our historic sites. All you have to do is Google Fort Benning Historic Trail or something like that, and that website will pick up. This picture in front of you is the Cortels that were built in the 30s and were the a part of this building was housed and headquartered soldiers from the 24th Infantry Regiment Colored. And right across the street was their PX, their theater. Those buildings have been restored and would be another example of something you could see on our historic walking, biking trails. Next slide. One of my favorite historic points at Fort Benning is the Calculator Monument, shown right here. Just a rock with a little simple plaque on it. Calculator was a dog. And Calculator was a mutt that ran around the camp when it was shortly after it was formed in the 20s. And he would go around and beg for food. And I don't know if he had a name originally, but what would happen was he would beg for food because he had a limp, and I think people felt sorry for him. So he would limp around, and people would feed him. But then somebody at some point noticed that he wouldn't always limp on the same leg. Sometimes he would limp on the left back leg, sometimes on the right back leg. And so they named him Calculator. I guess he was calculating which leg to limp on to get some handouts. But they loved that dog so much that when he died, they put a plaque on this rock, and that rock sat in front of for many years in front of post headquarters, which is another historic landmark you see in the background there. That's how much they love that dog. Next slide. Well, this is probably the last and maybe one of the most important slides. Why do we do this? It's for military soldiers and families. And I can tell you during the COVID crisis, especially when things started last spring, we as a protective measure, a general order was issued that required people to pretty much shelter in place, not travel, uh, not be in large groups. And these trails became a wonderful outlet for people. And I saw trail usage increase remarkably. This family here was on the trail one evening when my wife and I were biking along, and she graciously allowed me to take a picture. But I want to make you think about, if you've been in the military, what it's like to be in the military. You probably grew up or you went to high school somewhere. You get in the military, or maybe you meet somebody in the military, and all of a sudden you find yourself uprooted, and you're living on a military installation somewhere or in that community. So you've been taken away from your family and your friends and your network. These trails provide a connectedness, and for Fort Benning, you see people in Columbus using the trails coming onto Fort Benning, and vice versa, Fort Benning going into Columbus. And it creates a sense of community, identity, and it brings people together. And that's a wonderful thing. And that's why we do it. If you think about the soldiers we serve, somewhere around 10 to 20,000 permanent party, but thousands of trainees come here. And a lot of trainees come here with no car. And so these trails allow them, with about a 50-minute bike ride, you can get on this trail and get from downtown Columbus to downtown Fort Benning, or main post Fort Benning, to downtown Columbus. So and that's especially noticeable with our foreign students. They rarely come with a vehicle, but there's ways to rent bikes on Fort Benning, and certainly in downtown Columbus. So these help them out substantially. So that is the end of my presentation. Daniel, if you can think of anything I missed, or give us some closing remarks, I would appreciate it. And by the way, I'll say my email address is at the bottom of this last slide here. I'll turn it over to you, Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Kirk. So yeah, we're going to get into some Q&A here. For those listening, if you've got any questions, now's the time to pop them into the Q&A tab. And we're going to get to as many as we can here for Kirk. So I think the first question that I've got is really kind of, what are your plans for expansion of this trail system?
Thanks. I will show you that. And since Richard was kind enough to chat in with something right away, he wants to know, is there much of a maintenance tail? Daniel, do you mind if I address that immediately?
Okay, sure. We'll do that one first.
The answer is no, there's not much. I think that's something, as the maintenance chief at Fort Benning, one of the things I thought of is, hey, what do you need to do to preserve these things? Frankly, once you've built the trail, it doesn't cost a lot of money to keep it up, unless you're next to a bunch of trees where they start to uproot the pavement, or cause bumps and things in the trail. To give you a good sense of it, in 25 years, our oldest section of the trail that was near the woods needed to be repaved. So the original purchase price of that trail, in terms of rough dollars, is you got to figure about $1 million a mile. And then I'm going to say every 25 years, you'll have maybe a need to repave. And that repaving cost could come depending on the complexity. In this case, we're grinding up and putting down a new base, and entirely, and widening this trail for 1.3 miles for $377,000. So if you built a trail for $1 million for a mile, 25 years from now, you might have a repaving cost of somewhere between, I would say, anywhere from $100,000 to on the worst case, 300,000 if you're going to modernize or upgrade it. So if you did the math, what's $100,000 divided by 20 years for a mile? That sounds like about 5,000 a mile a year. One of the other maintenance issues is just sweeping these things every once in a while. We have street sweepers. These things are wide enough to accommodate the street sweeper, and that can be done. The entire trail could be done in a couple hours on a street sweeper, which would be a few $100s worth of a maintenance driver. So that's pretty easy. Plans for expansion. Yes. Daniel, can I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's give this a try. And
all right.
I'm going to share my entire screen, I think. Do you see this, Daniel?
Not yet, Kirk.
All right, let me go back. Okay, I've got that. Here we go. Now do you see something different than the presentation?
I think you're loading. There we go. You're online.
Okay, well, so here's a map. And I don't know if you can see or follow my cursor, but on the far north end of the map is Muskogee County and Columbus. And marked in red is the trail system. And then Fort Benning, you can see a little airplane icon next to the Chattahoochee River. So our trail system goes into the heart of Fort Benning around that little airplane. And there is talk of a rails to trails. Sorry, I lost my PowerPoint there. I'm going to try to bring that back up real quick. Just bear with me 1 second. Is that map back up for you, Daniel?
Oh, yeah, you're back up now.
Okay, I think I touched my screen accidentally, but that Fort Benning has about 20 miles worth of trail on the internal part of the trail, but there's talk of a rails to trails project shown roughly in yellow here. That'd be 100-mile trail to our south and to our east, and I think that's a real possibility. I think it'll be built in segments over the years, but I think in the next 10 to 20 years, this thing will for sure get built. So one of the things we're going to try to do is expand our trail out to the west. But I also mentioned Phoenix City and building the trail in the city from Phoenix City down to the other side of Fort Benning, the Alabama side, and coming into Benning. So I'm going to focus my efforts at Fort Benning on expanding to areas that would connect to future expansion outside of the post. And I'll illustrate that in just a second. So Fort Benning is, now do you see a different map, Daniel?
Yes, indeed, Kirk.
Okay, so that's my Benning system there. One of the first things we're going to do is on post here, I mentioned this trail. If you see a heavy red line, the one that's on the sort of the heavy red line that's on the left-hand side is the next expansion, and it closes a loop. The loop, the trail along Marne Road that I was talking about earlier, and I showed a picture, ends at Martin Army Hospital. That's going to continue around Davis Hill Road, which is a large housing area, and connect to a new trail that we just built with recycling dollars. That's going to create another 10-mile loop on Fort Benning. After that's built, we'll start expanding out to the east with this other heavy red line that I've shown that goes past the commissary, the PX, through Kelly Hill, which is another developed or an area with a lot of buildings on Fort Benning. Out to Twilight Pond was a recreation area. Out to another trail that's already being proposed by a training unit as a running route, but it'll also be open to bikes and things like that. And then on out to Harmony Church, where you would hopefully connect one day to a 100-mile trail. So the basic idea here is to get all these cantonment areas done. And then another project we've got on the books and hope to get funded by IMCOM headquarters is the expansion of Custer Road. When I say expansion, it's really just a repaving and a widening at certain key intersections. But as part of that, we're proposing a bike trail that would kind of start here at the trailhead at Fort Benning at the Environmental Learning Center. What's significant about that trail is we have about 2,000 housing units that are currently connected on Fort Benning directly without going out of the neighborhood into our trail system. But this Custer Road expansion would connect the rest of our housing units, which is another 2,000 housing units. It's a great amenity. As the acting housing chief right now, I hear that a lot out of our constituents, that they would love to see their neighborhoods get connected. All right, so Daniel, I'm going to try to get back. And if we can go stop screen sharing. I hope, did that kind of answer that question, Daniel, about?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I see some, sorry, Daniel, got any other questions?
Well, I wanted to, this is kind of a follow-on from your question there about some of the maintenance tales. Just some of the technical details from Chris here about asking, is the trail asphalt or concrete? And if it's asphalt, have you had any problems with like edges unraveling or grass encroachment?
Yeah, the answer is mostly asphalt and mostly not a problem. That's because of the base being well done. And as a matter of fact, that wooded area that we're talking about, where we're repaving, we're going to put down some fabric underneath the asphalt that will be aimed at trying to prevent any intrusion from grasses or roots or things like that. But frankly, with the mowing and the fact that these trails are in the developed areas, we don't have much for encroachment. We do, because we're in almost a semi-tropical region. We have occasionally need to go through and cut some of the weeds and the branches and stuff like that start to encroach. This area that you're seeing in this photo right here with the family is one of the areas where that happens the most. This little bridge goes basically over a little swamp. So you get weeds and stuff growing up. So you got to go through there and cut that stuff off. I would say we have to do that probably twice a year. And it's as simple as, for our trail system, maybe a maintenance crew of four grounds guys going through in a course of a day. So several $100s takes care of that. I also saw this in the chat box. Scott Chambers said, in the Air Guard, we've had resistance from installation commanders due to anti-terrorism force protection concerns. And how have we dealt with that? Well, absolutely, that's a concern. And I would say Benning and Columbus have been so interconnected over the years, but the fact that this Riverwalk comes onto the installation from the city is a concern. The police for years have had a camera on this thing, and we make it known that you're being watched. But most recently, we've upgraded it. We've taken this trail, this bridge, which is basically at our trailhead. After you cross this bridge, we have rerouted a portion of our trail for about $200,000 to bring it right by the checkpoint. So the guards can see anybody coming and going. They spot check. The requirement is you have a driver's license, and our guards have a little handout. If somebody's not registered with Fort Benning, the person can get on their smartphone and apparently within a few minutes get vetted through an automated system, and then they'll have a pass on their phone that allows them to come and go. So we have had some resistance, especially from our police, our Directorate of Emergency Services. But frankly, I work with them, and we do things to make the trail accessible, but also safe for the installation. Great question, Scott. Daniel, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, we got a few more. I mean, we still got some time, so anybody else with questions, there's still time to get them in.
I am wondering if I've answered. I'm wondering if I've answered Scott's question, or if he wants to elaborate on that. I will say that usually military installations want to have a good relationship with their community, and that's one of the things I emphasize with my friends with the Directorate Directorate of Emergency Services, Fire and Police, is how these trails and making that connection serves us, both military and the community, so well. We need to work together to make them accessible, and I think that's the key, is addressing the concerns, but making it happen. Sorry, Daniel, any other questions?
Yeah. So here's a question from Stephen Carl. He says, he's asking what number or a percentage of bases or installations have something similar to this, or would you say have the potential to? It seems like it's a great value for residents and workers.
Well, I think they all have that potential, right? You know, and I think you start with what you got. We had a great sidewalk network, quite frankly, but we had gaps in that. And me being a biking enthusiast, I would, and we allow people to bike on our sidewalks. So I would bike along and see missing segments. And frankly, that's how I would look for this stuff. Just biking around Fort Benning as the maintenance chief, I would see things from a different perspective, but also get some exercise. And I would find out, hey, there's a gap here. You can't even walk from the headquarters to the hotel, the 1,000-room hotel. And they're only 3 blocks apart. And we have a 75-foot gap where there's no sidewalk. You got to walk on the street or the grass. Okay. Did a work order, spent $20,000, built that sidewalk, and now they're connected with ADA accessible paths. And so, and I think one of the selling points for these trails is ADA accessibility, which is tracked in the Army by our EEO office, and we get credit. So there's so many selling points for doing this that I think it's, if you got an advocate, you can go get money and focus on the areas where the need is the greatest. So I appreciate that question. I hope I answered it. But Daniel, do you think I answered that question?
I think so. And you're kind of answering my next question here, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on it. For somebody who wants to get this started on their post, what do you think is the first step that they should take? And it sounds like, you're talking about getting that advocate who can really kind of help you out. Yeah, any thoughts on that for people who want to get this started?
Well, advocacy for sure. I mean, you got to have a proponent, right? And anybody can be that proponent. But it helps to have a proponent that's connected, I think, into either the garrison or the DPW or some maybe morale, recreation, and welfare, somewhere where you have a platform to do this type of thing. But I think the other theme that hopefully came out in my article and in this presentation is collaboration. Collaboration, not only within the installation, but outside. Your recycling program, your Directorate of Public Works, Fire and Emergency Services, police, getting those advocates together, talking. As a matter of fact, we'll have a social hour here at our house in the spring after this COVID thing washes over, and I will bring local advocates that are enthusiastic and already serving on these committees together to talk about future plans. And we have seen that when we've gone to Hall of Fame trails all over the country. My wife and I, common theme everywhere is the ones that work and the ones that expand to hundreds of miles are those where you have people who are a little bit outgoing and willing to collaborate and work together to make these things happen. I continue to do this and will continue to do advocacy for these trails into retirement. And I'm looking forward to that, having even more time to bring people together and do these things. And you saw even with the University of Georgia students and what we're now doing at Auburn. And this is an easy sell. People love this stuff, and it's usually easy to get volunteers to help get going on it.
All right, thanks, Kirk. I would definitely encourage anyone who has questions, feel free to reach out to Kirk. We are making the slide deck available in the handouts tab. You can download it from there, or grab his contact information from this slide here. Yeah, so definitely. So thank you so much, Kirk. Thank you to everyone else here for attending this webinar. If you are interested in submitting an article or you have a topic that you'd like to share with our readership at the Military Engineer, please feel free to visit our website with our editorial calendar and our guidelines for writers. Be sure to download your PDH certificate from the handouts tab before you leave today. You'll also be receiving an email with the PDH certificate in case you miss it later today after the webinar ends. So on behalf of SAME, Military Engineer, and our featured presenters, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
And Daniel, I'm going to just tail in with one last thing. If you're in Columbus and you want a personalized tour of the Benning Trail System, you got my email. I'll be happy to give it. And Daniel, thanks for moderating. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kirk. I might take you up on that the next time I'm in Georgia. Might be
do.
a while, but I won't forget.
We'll have a good time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for presenting, and thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you all for joining.